So it's Labor Day weekend. I think we should start off with a little fun. What was your first paying job? Think back to the first job that you ever had where you actually got a paycheck for. Now, for people in my generation, the first job usually went something like this. You were either flipping burgers, or you were working in a retail store, so you were working behind like a cashier stand, you were folding clothes and making displays nice, or you were doing work out on a farm. I grew up in northeast Kansas, and we lived in town, but a lot of my friends had relatives, including I had relatives as well, that had farms in the northern part of the county. And so that was very common, the first paying gig that anybody had. Now think about career. What did you choose for career? Now some people chose, again, looking at my generation, but thinking about yourselves out here too. So I have some classmates who they chose the military, and we thank them every day for their service. Just tremendous people. Some in this congregation I know worked all their lives up to this point in the railroad industry. It's pretty cool career. Some drove trucks. Others started small businesses. A lot of us worked in offices. So I thought Labor Day weekend, I think it's appropriate for us to consider, what are we doing now? What did we do in the past? And what does that mean for all of us as far as our service to Christ from today going forward? So as I was thinking about this whole concept of work, it got me to thinking about, okay, what all jobs have I had? For the record, my first job was not any of those that I listed for you. But we're going to talk about my first job here in just a second. A friend of mine named Jason Ernzen and I each decided we were going to start cutting yards. So my first job was mowing yards in Leavenworth, Kansas. I had a lawn boy push mower. He had a better lawn boy push mower. And the idea was the two of us, we would get together. We decided, hey, we could make more money at this if we were faster at it. And we'd be faster at it if we worked together. We could do more yards that way. So we would load our mowers into his vehicle. We'd drive to a couple of places. We'd mow the grass. We'd get paid, and that money went to everything that high school kids spend their money on, right? Movies, McDonald's, girls, right? That was it. I spent a lot of money on your pastor at Wendy's with Frosties, just so you know. So my dad, who always had kind of an entrepreneurial spirit around him, he saw what we were doing. He thought, hey, we could do even bigger and better things with this. So he cut us a deal. He said, all right, now, I got a plan here. I will invest in equipment, real equipment, but you guys have to agree to work for me. So Jason and I are pretty smart kids, and we think, hey, steady paycheck. All right. So we did this, and what happened was a business called Lawn Care Unlimited. So there should be a business card here that Cameron can put up there for us. So pretty rudimentary business card, but it was kind of cool because as a 15-year-old kid, I had my name on a business card. You know, never had any to give out because I was always the guy pushing the mower or running the weed eater, but you get the idea. So my dad, as you can tell from that business card, he's one of these guys that he loves green paint. Nothing runs like a deer. So true to his word, he bought a utility tractor, and he bought a front end mower that allowed us to get really clean cuts around property. And I'm here to tell you that I learned more from that little push, or that front end mower, because the drive belt on that thing would come off all the time. And so Jason and I got really good at re-threading that drive belt to get that thing to run properly so the mower would engage the way we wanted it to. Now, that was the good equipment, but as you know, with any kind of yard, you have to do the trim work. And so that's where Jason and I really came in, was we were the ones that were operating the push mower and the weed eater. And I got to say, I got pretty good with that weed eater to the point where I didn't have to go behind our mowers. I could go wherever I really wanted to start with it, and I could figure out what our mowers were capable of. And so I would trim around stuff. And I always kind of took it with pride that whenever we would talk with customers, they would say, what I really like about your company is you take care of our property, you don't damage anything, and everything gets trimmed right. I like the way it's done. So that was a badge of honor for me as a kid. I really enjoyed that. At the height of this business, which would have been about summer of my senior year, the initial phase of the business, I should say, we were cutting 60 acres of grass a week. 3 people. My brother-in-law would help from time to time. And whenever we got behind, my dad would bring in a couple of other people that could handle. We liked that because they would handle the push mower and the weed eater, and then we were riding the equipment. But eventually I went off to school. And so my dad decided, well, I'm going to upgrade the equipment because I got fewer people to do this with now. So he ends up getting a contract with what is now the University of St. Mary to cut the main portions of their buildings. And so that 60 acres a week went to almost 160 acres a week. So don't feel sorry for my dad because he went out and bought a big tractor. And this time he bought one that he could have air conditioning. That was pretty cool. I didn't get to experience that at all. Never drove this tractor, by the way. But from that experience with my dad, I learned the importance of really hard work and the importance of doing things right. And it meant that, yeah, you were sweaty at the end of the day, but man, you felt like you really accomplished something because you could see the fruits of your labor. My friend Jason and I, we came to this, one of the fun things we did was when we had a yard that we thought we did really well with, we would refer to those as our carpets because the grass just looked, it was steady, it was thick, it was lush, it was bright green, it always looked great. To this day, I look back at that first job, and I don't know as I really have physically worked any harder than I ever did when I was working for my dad. But it was a great lesson in life. I think the growth of that business over the course of that time I was with it was one of the biggest accomplishments that I look at as far as a career, even though this isn't the field that I went in at school. Think about yourselves here for a second. Whether it's your career or a hobby that you're involved in, some activity that you take a lot of pride in, what is it? What was your biggest accomplishment in whatever that is that's on your mind right now? It could be your first job, your current job, the job you're retired from, something you do at your house. Biggest accomplishment, what is it for you? Hold on to that thought because we're going to come back to it in a few minutes. So this first job was a big deal for me, but I got to thinking, all right, I'm going to walk you through really quickly my stops along the way of my first career, which was as a newspaper person, because I think it shows the idea of hard work and some of the things that go into the tasks that are at hand here. So my first job, or my first career type job was as a sports correspondent for the Wichita Eagle. The only time I'd been in Lincoln prior to coming here for the interview for the job I have now was coming up here for KU Sports playing Nebraska in the old days of the Big 8. So that dates me just a little bit. The Big 8 was still around. And thanks to really good grades and some creativity with some assignments and a woman named Suzanne Shaw, who I still consider to be one of my good friends, she was my advisor at KU, I got this job. And with all due respect to Memorial Stadium here in Lincoln, I got to tell you, I don't think there's a better gig for a college kid to have 2 years of sitting on the floor at Allen Fieldhouse. So that red arrow represents where my seat was for 2 years. One of those years was the Final Four year. The other year, well, we won't talk about what UTEP did to us in the tournament. After school, after that training, your pastor and I got married, and we moved to Minnesota, St. Cloud, Minnesota. I was a newspaper design person and a copy editor. And in 1997, some of you will remember the Red River flood that hit Grand Forks, North Dakota. Tremendous flood, just snow, followed by rain. Levees broke. It was a disaster. And so as a front page editor, I'm trying to think of what is the things that's going to illustrate this story the best. And so they had this tremendous problem in Grand Forks. The there's a water or a gas main that broke in downtown while the rest of it was flooded all around it. Firefighters couldn't get to the fire. So it burned down a whole city block to the water line. And so we ended up with a story that I took the headline from the quote of the mayor that basically said, we've lost the town. We lost the city. Heart-wrenching stuff. So from there, Amy and I moved to Springfield, Missouri. And in Springfield, Missouri, 1 year to the day that I became the assistant sports editor, I got called into the editor's office, and Randy Hammer looks at me and says, starting tomorrow, you're the front page editor. Bye. That was basically the discussion. There wasn't much to it. Now, contrary to popular belief, you don't get to yell, stop the presses, all that often. I did it twice. First time, Governor Mel Carnahan was running for the Senate, and he was on a campaign trip, and his plane crashed. We got confirmation at 10:55 p.m. Deadline was 11:05. So we did this quick, hard work thing. We get everybody together, pooled our resources. I called people in from home, and over the course of the next 3 hours, we put together 6 pages of coverage on the death of the governor. It was a pretty impressive thing to see that many people working together. But I wanted to make sure that if we're going to walk through memory lane for me, that we had some fun with all of you. So I want to take you back to a November night, the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November of 2000. There was a little thing called an election between Al Gore and George W. Bush. We put out 4 front pages that day, and I've got 3 of them here. There's one that is lost, and I'm kind of heartbroken about that, but I couldn't find it in my files. So the first one showed the uncertainty of the night. It basically had a headline that said, you know what, there's this cliffhanger going on. We really don't know what's going on. But no sooner had this thing gone to the press that we get an AP bulletin that said Al Gore had probably won Florida. And so we went with that headline, and that's the one that I don't have. That we know, sir, we got about 1,000 copies off the press, and we get another bulletin from the AP, this time saying, wrong story, George W. Bush is going to win Florida. So we ended up with this front page. At the wire, Bush snares apparent win. That lasted for about 10 minutes. And then everybody figured out what the rest of us dealt with for the next, it was about 6 weeks, right, before we knew who our president was. So kudos to my friend Jan Peterson. She was my assistant news editor at the time. She came up with the headline finally that said, Bush or Gore, ? Only Florida knows. So from there we go to St. George, Utah, and we're there for about 14 and a half years. Now, I'm not going to inflict 14 and a half years of headlines on you, so don't worry about that. But there are 2. One that deals with the flood, which I think is appropriate given what we're facing in the Gulf Coast today, and the other one is about a most wanted criminal. So the first one is about a flood. Something called the Santa Clara River, which we would call a creek here in the Midwest. It ran about the size of, I would say, probably the Salt Creek. Is about as wide as this thing ever got. But thanks to snow and rain, at 3 tiers of reservoirs above this thing, they all overflowed, thanks to snow and rain. And so you end up with a river all of a sudden that's flowing larger than the Missouri River runs over on the eastern portion of the state. There was not a single home lost in the floodplain. None of them were in the floodplain. They were all 20 and 30 feet above any floodplain. The water came so fast and so furious that it literally chewed the banks out from underneath, and the houses fell, and now they are somewhere in the bottom of Lake Mead, outside of Las Vegas. So this is the top of a newspaper, and the reason I showed this is we won several awards for this thing because that's the same house. You see it as it's starting to fall into the water, as it is falling into the water, and then with it gone. That's how fast this happened. Final one is about a guy named Warren Jeffs. You may have heard about him. He ran a polygamous sect, not affiliated with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, so not part of the mainstream Mormons that you have heard about. But he was accused of and convicted ultimately of marrying off 14-year-old girls to 40-year-old men. And he was right in our home county, Citizen of the Year, right? The reason I share these stories is because, to me, they represent hard work. They represent stick-to-itiveness. I took all kinds of, depending upon the story, I would take all kinds of phone calls of people who didn't what my team was doing or thought I had done something wrong. But I looked at it as I was trying to inform the public. I was trying to share the word, share what was going on with our community. It was work. So today, our scripture I want to take a look at is Matthew 9, verses 27 to 38. And it illustrates the kind of work that Jesus did, and I think it illustrates the kind of work that he wants us to do to help further the kingdom in the world today. So reading Matthew 9, starting at verse 27. As Jesus went on from there, 2 blind men followed him, crying loudly, "Have mercy on us, Son of David." When he entered the house, the blind men came to him, and Jesus said to them, "Do you believe that I am able to do this?" They said to him, "Yes, Lord." Then he touched their eyes and said, "According to your faith, let it be done to you." And their eyes opened. Then Jesus sternly ordered them, "See that no one knows this." Yet they went away and spread the news about him throughout that district. After they had gone away, a demoniac who was mute was brought to him. And when the demon had been cast out, the one who had been mute spoke, and the crowds were amazed and said, "Never has anything like this been seen in Israel." But the Pharisees said, "By the ruler of the demons, he cast out the demons." They were doubting him. Finally, in conclusion, then Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and curing every disease and every sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them, because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore ask the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest." The laborers are few. I want you to keep that in mind. It's a key phrase. In this passage, we have Jesus performing 2 miracles, and I think he gives us an insight into who he is by doing them. The first one is he allows a person to see. It doesn't say how long the person's been blind, but the person obviously can't see, and now they can. He opened their eyes to see. Another person could not speak. Jesus fixed that. It says in Scripture that he cast out a demon. Whether he cast out a demon or he just healed somebody who had something wrong with the structure that allows us all to speak, I don't really think it matters. It was a miracle that he healed this person and now they could speak. I think it's important that the author points out that Jesus showed compassion wherever he went. So he's healing people. He's helping people see. He's helping people speak, giving them a voice. And he's showing them compassion all along the way. I think we can infer from this text what Jesus wants from all of us as his followers. I think Jesus could have done a lot of things. This is the ruler of the world, right? He's the king of all things. He could have sat on a throne and he could have said, "Do all these things, just do what I told you to do." And then he could have sat back and said, I've done my bit. I've told them what they need to do. He didn't do that, though. He went out into the people. He went out and healed people who were ill. He provided miracles for people who needed a miracle at the time. He traveled from town to town teaching about God. And I think he illustrates rather toward the end of that passage something that we all in the Midwest can grasp pretty easily. He used this frame of reference called the harvest. He says the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. When he talks about the harvest, really he's talking about souls. So we're going to explore that for just a moment. Now, in my current job, I got to spend last week one day in Salina, Kansas. So right smack in the middle. And I went to Trinity United Methodist Church, which has this huge community garden in the back of their church. And I mean, these folks, I talked to 4 people, and man, were they proud people. They had worked so hard on this garden. So they had more, let's see, they had tomatoes, potatoes, okra, corn, kale, and carrots. Those were the main things that they, there's some other stuff, but those were the main things that they grew. Somebody did have this big patch of sunflowers that I thought was pretty cool, but I'm a Kansas guy, so that appealed to me. But all those things I thought that was really cool. They had all these things. And they had so much that they couldn't eat it themselves. It started off as just a project that people could do to help feed their families. But the abundance that came from it, they were then able to give to the food bank there in Salina, Kansas. It's just one example of a mission or a project that grew out of something that people love to do. Now it's a key part of their ministry portfolio in that church. And the people in Salina have come to, they know Trinity United Methodist Church as one of the produce churches. You can see it when you're there. All the people I spoke with, they put in a considerable amount of time. They had to do several things, just like every garden and every crop. They had to prepare the soil. They had to plant the seeds. They had to make sure they watered it or nurtured it so that it could grow. They had to pick the weeds. Not the most fun part. All of them complained about picking the weeds, by the way. And then they had to prune. So if there was a branch that wasn't doing so well, they pruned it so that they could kill that, get that out of the way, and other stuff would grow better. And then finally they harvested. Sounds pretty normal, right? Anybody that's worked on a farm knows that that's something, all those steps you got to do, right? Anybody that's got a garden knows you have to do all those things. We understand the agricultural metaphors in Nebraska because we live it. We have family members that live it, or we have lived it. Well, Jesus is talking about harvest. But he's not talking about the produce. He's not talking about the things of today's world when he's talking about a harvest. He's talking about harvesting souls. Basically what Jesus is telling us, I think it's important that he culminates this portion of passage deals with the harvest, because he's done some pretty incredible things, right? He's helped people see. He's helped people speak. Now the challenge is he's telling people, that's all great. But I'm here to tell you, there's this important thing called the harvest, and the harvest is the souls. And if we aren't harvesting the souls, if we aren't helping plant seeds, nurture people, cultivate them in their discipleship, then we are not helping with the harvest. What good does it do all that other work and not harvest what happens from your fruits of your labor? Rots in the field, right? So I look at it this way. God's already prepared the soil. As United Methodists, we believe in this thing called prevenient grace. Some of you are having confirmation class nightmare flashbacks right now. Prevenient grace. It's the idea that grace is a gift that's given to us. We don't have to do anything for it. It's there from the beginning. You can't earn it. You just have to accept it. That's God tilling the soil. He's already prepared the soil for us. And we plant seeds all the time. I would argue that as United Methodists, we are excellent at planting seeds. Think about just this church. The fourth Wednesday dinners, that plants seeds. People come into the church, they see that people love them, are willing to feed them. That's planting a seed. The things that we do out here in the courtyard, our 4th of July celebration, the Halloween party that we've done, those are all ways of planting seeds with young people and their families. They become accustomed to knowing that Havelock United Methodist Church cares about their kids. They want their kids to have fun. It's planting the seeds. But farmers don't stop with the planting of the seeds, do they? Neither can we. For us to be real disciples, we have to look in the mirror and we have to ask ourselves, are we doing more than just planting seeds as individuals and then as a church? It could be kind of a sobering thing. I don't know if I can answer truthfully that, hey, I do more than plant seeds. I asked you a few minutes ago to think about what your favorite accomplishment was in either your career or your job that you once had or a hobby that you have. So I want you to think about that greatest accomplishment right now. And now think about the effort that went into it. A lot of work went into building that little business with 2 push mowers into something that had that big tractor. My dad still runs that business, by the way, at the age of 75. It no longer does grass cutting. It's way too long a story to get into, but now he designs and does sports field construction. How he got from there to there, there's not enough time to get into that. But it's hard work. And when we really want something, when we really think it's important to us, we put in the work, don't we? I can't tell you all those stories that I ran through the board. The reason I wanted to do that for you is I wanted you to see the kind of work that I used to do. And I'm here to tell you, it was a 24/7, 365 day a year job. I was in Disneyland with my family, and I would get phone calls. But I had to answer the phone. I had to go through it because we had work to do. It was important to me. The work that you've done in the past, I'm sure was important to you. How important is helping with the harvest for Christ? Think about that for just a moment. We're here to serve our God. So we're here to help harvest those souls. We have to pick the weeds and we have to prune the dead stuff off. And that means starting with ourselves. We have to ask ourselves seriously, are we taking part in small groups? Are we regular attendees in worship? I would say regular attendees once a month. No, we're talking like 3 times a month. That's what regular attendance really is. Are we doing that on a regular basis? Are we taking part in Bible study? Are we praying each day? These are all things that help us nurture ourselves so that we can then go and nurture other people. Finally comes the harvest. And this is where we are all needed. Jesus tells us we're all needed. So how many people here today are retired? Don't be shameful about it. You earned it, by golly. Okay? You're retired. The good news is you're retired. The bad news is you're never retired from Christ's service, if you want to call it bad news. We all have a role to play no matter where we are and what stage in life we're in. We can help plant seeds. So if you're already inviting people to church each Sunday, keep it up. That's what we need. If you haven't invited anyone in a while, it's time to help with that harvest. Help by planting seeds of people by asking them to come with you to church. You can help at the church. Yes, all of us can do something. Now, all of us can't lug all the stuff out to the courtyard here for the 4th of July and those types of things. But we are capable of helping with things like the UMW dinner that's going to happen here in a week. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. We can all help with the 4th Wednesday dinners in some way, shape, or form. All of us have a role that we can play. We can help nurture people. Help ourselves by Bible study and by inviting other people in. And finally, again, back to that harvest. Jesus said the harvest is plentiful. And I really believe that to be true. I don't know how many people are sitting here in the pews today, but I know there can be a lot more. We have a lot capacity for a lot more. But there aren't going to be more people here if we don't go out and do what Jesus did. We have to help people see by our actions, by our invitation to come in. We have to do like Jesus did by giving people a voice. We're not going to be able to cure whatever the problem is that keep them from speaking, but there are people who are downtrodden in our society today that don't have a voice because of political reasons, socioeconomic issues. It's up to us to help them have a voice. And then finally, we can help with the harvest. We're Nebraskans. We know how to do this stuff. We have to translate it from the stuff that nourishes our bellies to what nourishes our souls. So that's my challenge for all of you as we go forward. Think about this week seriously. Look in the mirror when you do it. What can I do? Maybe I can help out with events here and physically do stuff. Maybe you've been blessed financially. If you've been blessed financially, then maybe you can give a little bit more to the church, and that would help with these other things that we have going on to help resource them. We are not the only church that faces this challenge. Harvesting souls is something that Jesus wants everybody who calls himself Christian to do. We can't take care of what's going on across the street. We can't take care of what other churches are doing in our area, but we can take care of what's going on here. So just challenge yourselves this week. Ask yourself, what can I do to help with the harvest? Amen.